Welcome to Kit Katastrophe. My name is Kit, and today we'll be taking a look at Transformers Energon SKYBLAST. This figure came out in 2004 as part of Wave 1 of the Energon assortment. Energon SKYBLAST transforms into a white and red Cybertronian jet which, at a passing glance, looks much like Skyfires of yore. However, SKYBLAST is a far smaller and more compact jet. He's more of a fighter than a transport. I'd like to say that this jet looks sleek, but I'd be lying unless viewed straight from above. This jet is more akin to a loaf of plastic than it is to anything airworthy, but it's fun to pretend anyway. If you want to justify it that badly, you could say this is more of a spaceship than something meant to be piloted under atmospheric conditions. The overall shape of the alternate mode is very sharp, looking like an oblong isosceles triangle with some forks and afterburners stapled to the ends. The cockpit is really well painted. Well, it has to be, considering it's made entirely of translucent red plastic. I really love the black surrounding the golden cockpit frame. It really pops against the white. Shame that immediately underneath it is the robot head, not even trying to hide. This would be fine on a car transformer, where you'd expect the thing to be on the ground at all times, but on a jet, it's just laughably bad. Also on the bottom of the jet are a pair of inexplicable grabby claws? There's no real gimmick tied to these, it's just an added play feature. SKYBLAST, much like his Omnicon brethren, comes with a smattering of translucent red accessories, the first of which is his Autobot Energon star, which will remain affixed to SKYBLAST's person for the remainder of this review. I always really liked the design of the Energon stars, both Autobot and Decepticon, and I'd wish they'd come back for some occasion in the future. The Autobot star looks really striking, almost like a deputy's badge. SKYBLAST's next two accessories are a pair of blades which can be placed on the ends of his wings, which add an 80% more stab to your swooshing. Finally, there is a long-barreled gun of some kind, whose usefulness in flight I find to be highly suspect. I can't complain too much about weapon storage, though. Eschewing the gun and the blade, SKYBLAST's transformation scheme is fairly complex for such a small figure from this era, even beating out some modern Legends figures in complexity. The best I can describe it is that you're supposed to unwrap SKYBLAST's limbs from his torso, which is really more dynamic than it sounds. Speaking of dynamic, his transformation ends with an automorph before such things were even called automorph. Rotating the chest plate 180 degrees in turn rotates the cockpit around, revealing the head. As a kid watching the Energon cartoon, I was always a little saddened whenever I saw SKYBLAST on screen. My sole Omnicon until Christmas 2018 was Strongarm, and I thought SKYBLAST was just the coolest thing ever. Having him in hand, I can't say I'm too disappointed by this robot mode. It definitely looks every bit as awesome as it did on the show, and in the catalogs packed in with other figures I got back then. Sure, there are some limitations, which I'll go over shortly, but this robot mode is exceptional nonetheless. It's remarkably clean, too, with only the cockpit being considered kibble in my eyes. Every other piece of the jet mode is integrated really well into the robot mode, making for a really distinctive silhouette. He looks more like Skyfire's little brother than a straight Skyfire homage. This is helped in part by the head sculpt, which is very much based on the old Generation 1 Air Commander. The sculpting and paintwork leave it a little too glossy and undefined, but it's definitely reminiscent. I do like the added antenna on the one side there. The gun from vehicle mode can be held like one in robot mode, though it definitely looks a little too big for him. Coupling the gun with the two blades forms the Energon Spear, which looks far more at home vertically in his grip. Out of all of the Energon weapons packed in with the Omnicons, this one is the most coherent and is therefore my favorite. If you know anything about the Unicron trilogy, you'll know immediately that there isn't much to talk about in terms of articulation when it comes to basic class Unicron trilogy figures. But let's give it the old college try. At the head, he technically has a joint. If you get the cockpit out of the way and twist his titties, he can look around. But that's not very useful. It's quite the opposite. You can technically sort of de-gear it and make it click one click either way, but that means his cockpit comes over his head kind of like G1 Dive Bomb's bird head, which ends up looking a little bad. since it's connected to the back of the head by a little stalk. So the head is basically non-existent, but you can technically use it for some more subtle poses. At the arms, they have a swivel that goes all the way around, or at least it would. It kinda clashes with the chest plate, but you can make it past the chest plate. It's not a big problem. It's not as if these winglets are like G1 6-shot wings. They go all the way out, so he can T-pose. He has nothing at the biceps, which is a shame, because there is technically room for a cut across there, but he does have a little elbow joint that does go past 90 degrees. So, all is forgiven. All his sins have been absolved. There's nothing at the waist, even though there is definitely a place to cut across, for one. But the hips are ball-jointed. They go forward, they go backward, and they go outwards all the way. So he does a lot more than some other Omnicons I could care to mention. He has nothing at the knees, however, which is a damn shame. Every single other Omnicon has a knee, but SKYBLAST doesn't. His legs just break and you see the stump that shoots fire. He can point his toe and his heel to potentially grab things with his feet, but I wouldn't do it. So yeah, that's about your lot for Energon SKYBLAST. Like I said, it's not much to talk about, but it's serviceable enough for his size and for the time he came out. Energon SKYBLAST is quite possibly my favorite Omnicon, and possibly my favorite Energon-class figure from the entire line. Both his modes are pretty well designed and clean thanks to his wonderfully smart transformation. Sure, he has some serious limitations when it comes to articulation, but that was par for the course at the time. He manages to look those limitations in the eye, and still manages to be a really fun and intriguing figure despite them. For that, I rate Energon SKYBLAST as lovely. As for my next review, I'll be looking at another Energon Omnicon, Strong Arm. This has been Katastrophe. Transform and roll out.